This is a tier that is you're still a Holly, I think, which started with starting pitcher number 46, Zach Gallen, 47 Yu Darvish, 48 Hunter Brown, 49 Seth Lugo, and 50 Reynaldo Lopez, and begins with number 51, Shane Baz. Shane Baz, who both you and I had ranked higher, like right in our like November rankings. And he's dropped a little bit for you. So just talk about whether that's concerns with Boz or just other guys moving up a little bit.
Well, there's also the fact that he's not going to be pitching in Tropicana,
Mm-hmm.
and that is harmful for all the Rays pitchers. Going to George Steinbrenner Field, yes, you want to talk about the New York City dimensions and the effects of that, but this is also being in Florida weather, which is not good for pitchers, which is part of the negative as well. But with Shane Baz, it's a case where I think that he does have the skill set of being a very consistent pitcher. Last year, his slider, when he came back from Tommy John, was not nearly as good as it was before. However, he adjusted. He had a curveball that he was very reliable with that really stepped into the place of that slider. Four seamer command is just very good, and it's not as elite of a pitch as it used to be, but it's still very good. So you have two solid offerings in that fastball and curveball with Shane Baz, a slider as well that is effective. It's just not as effective. And the whole package is like, yeah, this works. It's also the Rays is the tougher
Mm-hmm.
park. There's a little more haze with what we're going to get. I do feel that if you draft Shane Baz, you won't want to drop him the entire year. So he's inside of this. I think you're a Holly. Like, we're not going to really be looking at you and be like, oh man, Shane Baz, you're really holding me back. But there is a complexity of how much are the Rays going to rely on him, and are those strikeouts really going to come back? Is that curveball going to be the same?
Yeah, I love that we got what we got from Boz last year without really being what we believe is his full self because
Right.
we didn't see that slider. And so yeah, there's possibility to dream on that upside. I have him a little higher than you. I think he settled in at like 46 for me, but we're talking about like pretty
Same thing.
minimal
Yeah.
differences there. So yeah, it would be great. It'd be great if the home park concerns were diminished and really like you might not have those concerns at the beginning of the year, right? April, May, it's not going to be as humid in Florida. The ball won't carry as much. So you might get like two really strong months of Shane Baz and then decide, hey, I'll flip him. Hey, whatever. We can make the adjustments when the humidity comes and we'll see how we go from there. Um, the next pitcher is somebody that I think is kind of like rising up both of our internal rankings. Um, Not as high as some people have him. I still think that your ranking right here, 52nd for Cristopher Sanchez, is like a little below where some are ranked, but we are intrigued by the potential of a new pitch that he has hinted at.
Yeah, so I want to explain here. We're going to talk about Gavin Williams in the next podcast, I believe.
Mhm.
And if you read that blurb on Pitcher List, my top 400, which is 75,000 words, you'll see that Gavin Williams himself is like over 1,000. And it's because I go through what determines those high level stats that we always like to talk about, ERA and WHIP and their walk rate and their strikeout rate and their hit rate and all that kind of stuff. And then you realize, oh, you can just look at the individual pitches and see their performance, and then that will dictate those things we care about. And I'm bringing that up with Christopher Sanchez because he had a 124 whip last year. And how does that happen? He has such a low walk rate, right? Well, he had a 9 hit per 9. Well, then why is he allowing so many hits? Oh, Christopher Sanchez throws sinkers over the plate to right-handers and they just get hit. Right? I mean, it's just here you go. Here's a sinker. Please just let me get a called strike here so that I can set up that changeup instead and demolish you that way. And he's always needed that extra pitch against right-handers. He tried to make it the slider at times, not really. The slider improved against left-handers. And Christopher Sanchez did move from away to left-handers with a sinker to inside, but there needs to be more. And that would be the cutter. And literally today, we are witnessing Christopher Sanchez for the first time in spring.
Mhm.
And I sure as heck hope I see a cutter. I
Right.
really do. If he's able to get that inside to right-handers, don't use it as a backdoor pitch. Don't use it as another thing for lefties. This should be the focal point of your attack against right-handers. Inside with that, sinkers away, changeups underneath. That could bring that hit per 9 down from 9 all the way down to 8, maybe even underneath that if he does it. But I don't know yet. And that's really the big
Yes.
thing here. You want that big strikeout arm. I don't really think we're going to get a 25% strikeout arm from Christopher Sanchez. It's just the changeup. Fastball doesn't put guys away. The slider's fine against lefties. It's really hard to see that world happening. So he has to get down that whip, and the only way is with that cutter. I'm optimistic, but it really something has to change with that sinker approach to right-handers.
Yeah, and this is where we say like, hey, keep an eye on what we're doing because this might be a guy we move up, and we don't want to react too much because we know that also guys will throw a pitch in spring and maybe we enjoy what it will do or how it helps, and then they kind of abandon it at the first sign of struggle in the regular season.
Yeah.
I am intrigued by the fact, or I am buoyed by the fact that like he threw the cutter last year. I know it was only 3 times, but what we know that means is that it was a pitch he was working on last year. He worked on it enough last year that he tried to throw it in a game. He didn't like it, so he stopped throwing it, but it's not something that he just started doing for the first time in the offseason. It's something he's been toying with for a while. So if he then went back to the cutter in the offseason, it's not starting from scratch,
Yeah,
which makes
right.
me feel a little bit more optimistic that it could be a pitch he actually works into the arsenal this year.
Yeah.
Um, so
He
yeah,
threw
I'm
3
I'm
3 cutters.
I'm
I was
hoping.
like, "Yeah, I'm good
Hoping.
after that." I'm like, "What?"
Yeah. He's like, I'm done. I'm
Oh,
done with
man,
that.
Christopher Sanchez.
Um, we are the I'm less optimistic. I don't know about the next guy. Like maybe it's just it's ageist of me, which I shouldn't be ageist at 40 years old.
Oh my gosh,
But
Eric.
Ronel Blanco came a little bit out of nowhere. And I know that as we talked about previously, when he came out, it was like, oh my God, that changeup is otherworldly. And then he actually settled into a pitcher who had a little bit more to offer than just a really good changeup. However, he came out of nowhere as a 30-year-old, and I just don't know with the lack of track record, um, if I feel so comfortable trusting him over some of the guys we have ranked after him.
Yeah, I totally get that. Ronel Blanco actually in 2023 appeared, and he was more of dominant with that slider. There are times when I watch pitchers and I say, "Okay, cool, you're a right-hander. Like, what are you doing with the slide piece?" And they just nail that pitch down in glove side, and you just have a good camera angle, and you just see like, "Yep, that's a slider that will miss bats." That is what the textbook of like this is an effective slider is. But that's all I thought Ronel Blanco was. It was a
Mhm.
four seamer that really wasn't enough, and that slider. And then when he showed up and earned that spot at the last moment because all these guys got hurt, or Urquidy and France and McCullers wasn't ready, and Garcia and all this stuff was just like everyone was not there. So Blanco had an opportunity, and he obviously seized it.
Right.
And that changeup was the game changer. It was all of a sudden, oh, you have something else here that you can actually go against lefties. And really, I did like that Ronel Blanco was a little tepid with his fastball. There are many times that he actually just would throw it way out of the zone and not just give in and then
Mhm.
lean back on the slider later. And it worked really, really well for him. So I hope that Ronel Blanco has that changeup again. And I have this rank because I do ultimately feel that, look, you are the number 4 for the Astros, not number 5. And that means, I mean, if not even like the number 3, you have a very secure rotation spot for a very good Astros team.
Yes.
And that itself should be productive enough. We've seen him obviously miss lots of bats. The downside, of course, is that Ronel Blanco could very well just throw too many fastballs in the zone, not have the changeup become two pitch, and he breaks the Wasker rule of only having an elite slider and that's it. And that would be terrible. So, Blanco, I'm optimistic that you have more than that. And I don't think you're going to get to a point that you really want to drop Ronel Blanco. Still, I recognize he's not as secure as others. I have like the bottom of this. It says, I think you're a Holly still, right? That's the whole tier. The end of it, it's the last two guys we're going to talk about, Jeffery Springs and Nathan Eovaldi, are also teetering in this way, more so than I think Christopher Sanchez and Shane Baz are. But I look, you're going to get wins, Ronel Blanco. You're
Yeah.
going to get more strikeouts, I think, than the other two guys as well. You're going to get a higher combination of wins and strikeouts than the other two. You might get slightly better ratios with the other. So put them wherever you want to. But the changeup really is everything. If the changeup's there, he'll be completely fine.
Yeah, just added context. Lance McCullers is throwing live bullpens, but we don't really have any timeline for his recovery. And Luis Garcia is kind of like, I think the last time they suggested a timeline was that maybe Garcia would return in May to the mound. But we have no update on that. So to Nick's point, Ronel Blanco doesn't really have competition for a month or two
And
before
then
we
it's
really have to worry about it.
Wesneski is the number 5 right now
Yes,
too.
unless Wes, and then that requires Wesneski. What if he breaks out? There's a lot of
Right.
moving pieces, but Blanco feels pretty secure. You alluded to these two pitchers before. The first one is Jeffery Springs, who has a new team, and I guess that offers a little bit more security for Jeffery Springs this year.
I mean, I guess so because it's not the Rays, right? So he's not going to get as limited in the athletics. But yeah, whatever, go ahead and do the thing. But the problem with Springs is that his fastball is very hittable, and his slider isn't as devastating as we see from other guys against left-handed batters. The changeup is amazing, though. We know this. Left-handers with amazing changeups will just have success because you're facing right-handers more often than not. And Springs does a good job of locating these pitches for the most part. So I think it's relatively safe. If you draft Springs, you're probably not going to drop him unless you're like me and you don't want someone like Jeffrey Springs as the human on your teams. But I totally understand this. I have him at 54 because yeah, this should be productive for your squads. And say what you want about his elbow injury and the fear of him coming back. Is he fully healthy? My understanding is that he's healthy right now. I mean, I don't think that trade happens if he's not healthy,
Right.
and you should feel fine just drafting Springs, putting him in your lineup, and forgetting about it.
Yeah. And again, not a lot of wins there. We don't really know how the ballpark is going to play, so things to keep in mind. Um, but a solid pitcher who's probably just going to get the run that he needs. The last pitcher on here, speaking of elbow strains, a guy who has battled them throughout his career, it's Nathan Eovaldi. Um, we've talked a lot about Eovaldi and his success being linked to fastball velocity in the past. And so this seems to be a situation where right now we have no indication that Eovaldi isn't anything other than healthy. And so you roll him out there and he's going to be good. And there will probably be a time in the season where he battles some injury or battles some fatigue and the velocity starts to dip and his results start to dip. And either you bench him or drop him, depending on how deep your league is, probably just bench him. And then he'll right the ship again. And we've kind of done this dance with Eovaldi many times before.
Right. And with Eovaldi too, the Rangers defense is phenomenal. With his infield defense. So you want that for Eovaldi, a guy who's allowing more balls in play, and more grounders with the four seamer and the splitter. I am a little concerned that the put away rate on his splitter last year was very high,
Mhm.
and that it should take a bit of a downturn. He also allows massive ICR marks of over 40% on all three of his main pitches against lefties: heater, splitter, and cutter. And none of those have been efficient as a put away pitch. That could get better with a splitter. That might be a way to even it out a little bit, but it is a little annoying that none of those have been that kind of pitch. And it just means that I think Evaldi isn't as good dealing with left-handers. He has more fear, I think, I against them. It doesn't really. It's interesting too with splitters specifically. Some guys really struggle when they have too much space, when they don't have the confinements
Right.
of the right-handed batter. That means they go more arm side misses. While against righties, they actually get it more precise, which is kind of interesting. Some guys work that way, some don't. It feels like Evaldi does a little bit, unfortunately. And I like him as just like, yeah, he's gonna be fine again. He's gonna have those ridiculous games at times where it's just everything's working and he goes 8 innings and the Rangers like, yeah, sure, do whatever you want to do. But overall, it's not going to be this big impact play. And because of that, with the sight of possible regression, maybe that velocity goes down again. I'm not really putting that much weight on that, but it is a small thing for Eovaldi. It just turns into a guy that like, yeah, you can draft him, it's fine, but don't hold on too tightly. And it's possible, but unlikely that you'll want to drop him during the year.
Yes, agreed. And most of the time, it's going to be you move him to the IL rather than drop him. With
Sure.
Eovaldi, historically speaking, it has been move to the IL, pick up somebody else, bring Eovaldi back when he's healthy. That gives him a little bit of stability, and I certainly understand his ranking here on a team that could be one of the best teams in the AL again with that lineup, which gives him a pretty good win share.